welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this week. And this is going to be the weekly astro weather for the week of March 30th through April 6th, 2025. I'm excited to be back helping you guys kind of figure out what the heck is going on with everything with the astrology. I hope you guys are doing well post solar eclipse in Aries. If you're watching this on the 30th, we're still kind of in it. But I'm here to kind of help you guys navigate. We're going to be talking all about this Pisces party in the sky and what is going on with these planets that are all kind of bunched up in this sign in the late degrees of Pisces. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel. This will alert you as to when I have new videos, as I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, trying to make sense of what is going on in the cosmos. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider leaving me a comment or sharing it with other people who would find it helpful, who are astrologically savvy, would love to help. Boy, oh boy, it has been quite the week. Well, the good news is that if you've managed to get through the solar eclipse that we had yesterday, we are in the clear. We do not have eclipse season for 6 months. So we're still kind of bouncing back from that today. There's still some wounding coming up. We'll talk all about it, but there's lots of other things that are happening, which I feel like are really supportive and really, really helpful as we kind of navigate the week ahead. We're going to be really looking at a pretty potent mix with some of the lunar transits. Hopefully, as the moon's getting into Taurus, we're going to feel a little bit more grounded. We're definitely going to see some electric shifts, and obviously the emotional tides are still turning. I'm looking forward to the stability that we're going to see with that Taurus moon. I feel like things are going to be buzzing as the moon transits into the sign of Gemini, giving us all lots of opportunity to better communicate and also kind of expand when it comes to our curiosity. We'll see the moon move into Cancer this week, and it's all about kind of nurturing ourselves as well as our home. And then we're building into the end of the week as we see a grand and dramatic Leo moon transit. So obviously, things are still shaking out after the eclipses. We've got a couple planets retrograde, so you can still expect some eclipse surprises. Lots of karmic connections as planets are meeting with Saturn and the North Node, and some soul-stirring moments. Especially, I think, midweek as Mars in Cancer is kind of linking up with like this powerhouse Pisces Stellium that we're seeing in the sky. Now, whenever we see connections with the North Node and Saturn, there's always fated relationship stuff that kind of comes up. Obviously, opportunities for emotional healing as we're seeing some water trines and spiritual growth. So we kind of have to weave through it all. But I do think it's going to be a good thing. We just have to kind of buckle up because this is a week that's going to require us to definitely take some time to be a little bit more introspective, to kind of help work with some of the changes that have been playing out from this eclipse season. So I'm going to break it down for you guys day by day, and I'm excited to do that. And before I get into that, I always pick like one transit that I really want to kind of focus on that I feel like highlights the week. There's a lot of deja vu going on. If you guys have been seeing my previous videos, I just talked about Venus returning back into Pisces. We're seeing Venus and Mercury now kind of dancing in this sign. And they're coming into connection with Saturn and the North Node. But something that's really stable and supportive that you're going to see throughout this week that's playing out is Mars in Cancer's trine to Saturn. Okay, so this is going to be, I think, really helpful. It's going to help us kind of build emotional resilience. If you guys haven't seen my ex, you guys should follow me at BTV Astro. I did a post right before the solar eclipse in Aries, and I was talking about hermit crabs. And how the solar eclipse that we saw in Aries featured a Mars in Cancer, which is in hard aspect to Chiron in Aries. And then it reminded me of hermit crabs, and that hermit crabs, eventually they outgrow their shell, and they have to go and find a new shell that they call home. And something about this eclipse really reminded me of that, because I know that, you know, what we see with hermit crabs is they have like this habit, especially if they're like around other crabs, they'll like line up their shells and they'll exit their homes and then kind of like leave it open to kind of exchange shells and, you know, kind of size up if they need to go into something new. They work as a community basically. Because when hermit crabs are alone and they cannot find a new home, they can't find a new shell, they get really stressed out when they're isolated, and it can often impact their health. And so I was looking at the Mars in Cancer, kind of like the emotional movement, right? And the squares to Chiron and Aries that, some of us are feeling like we need to move on. We need to cut ties from the past, or we need to physically move or make changes in our private life or our domestic zone. And really, the pain from the solar eclipse comes from if we are not willing to grow into this new shell, if we are wanting to stay in the past, if we want to, maybe we're too afraid to kind of go into the unknown and kind of embrace some of what that solar eclipse at Aries was all about at a 9, adventure. So I use this example for you guys because that Mars Chiron square is really setting up not just last week and even into today, but for 6 to 12 months as we see the solar eclipse play out, that if we're playing it small and if we're unwilling to get out of our comfort zone, it can create obviously some issues and some wounding. And we can also feel like we are isolated or, kind of like cast aside. But if we can work with the positive energy from the eclipse and even into this week, where Mars is trining Saturn and the North Node, this is where we can make magic happen. Saturn is about karma. It's also about the collective. The North Node in Pisces is really talking about being kind, compassionate, trusting, and also willing to kind of maybe embrace the unknown. Like there is this sense of not knowing exactly where we're going, but emotionally we feel like we've kind of hit this point where we know that there is no return. So you guys are going to feel that this week. Obviously, we've got Mars that's also in aspect still to Mercury, Venus, and the North Node. So all of those planets that are kind of bunched between 29 and 24 degrees. This is a stellium. We've got 3 planets and a node that's there. So there is like this collective energy that's building and brewing. Planets that are going to be stationing, obviously conjunct the lunar eclipse that we had, the same degree that we had in the fall of last year. In fact, all of the Mercury and the Venus retrograde is very much entangled in eclipse cycles, both the lunar eclipse from Pisces in 2024, but also Mercury and Venus went retrograde over the solar eclipse degree that we just had. So there's both this beginning and kind of like releasing, and then there is from that beginning, it has to come from a conclusion or a completion, basically. So they're all kind of saying the same thing. I feel like this configuration, it really stands out. We've seen it kind of going on back and forth really since, the end of January going into February as Mercury and Venus started moving through this sign. And whenever we see trines in astrology, it does represent like something free-flowing, okay? It's a Jupiterian energy. It can make things feel bigger, more expansive, more abundant, but also more emotional. So I've heard from a lot of you guys, everybody's been telling me just how sensitive you've been, how crazy your dreams have been, how on point your intuition has been. And I feel like a lot of this is just that magnification that kind of comes through planets in Pisces, traditionally ruled by Jupiter, which makes things bigger. And then we also see the trine from Mars. So the alignment is going to be peaking basically April 4th and 5th. So you're going to kind of see that as we're getting later into the week, but you might be feeling it a little bit earlier if you're more sensitive. And I feel like it's a very profound, karmic, spiritual, and deeply emotional time. Okay. So it's almost like after all the craziness in March, we're getting into April, and there is this grand unveiling that's going to be taking place with some of these conjunctions and trines. Now that North Node in Pisces, we're going to be dealing with it for the better part of the next 18 months. So some of us are still kind of getting acclimated with this nodal change. This is all on an individual level, but also a collective level. It's pointing us in a new direction. So it's a call towards Pisces things, compassion, right? Surrender, unity. And with Mars in Cancer, obviously, it's a bit debilitated here. It gets a little moody. But this is about emotional protection. This is also about instinctual action. And it's harmonizing through the trine this week with that North Node destiny point. So it's kind of activating a karmic current in a way. And I feel like this isn't random. Obviously, this is the universe's way of just kind of nudging us to move forward in what just feels right. Even if we can't see what's kind of coming up next, we have to kind of trust our intuition to lead the way. So Mars is really fueling our drive to nurture and defend what's sacred, aligning with actions and higher purpose of that Pisces North Node. I think the presence of like a Venus retrograde, a Mercury retrograde at the same time, where there is this dance where we're reassessing love and values alongside learning how to better communicate and get insight into just exactly what it is that we admire or love or value the most. So as these two planets are retrograde, they're also meeting with Saturn, which is the planet of obviously lessons and karma, but also boundaries. For some of us, it might feel like, with the North Node Saturn, when we see this aspect, it's not often, but when we see it, that there is some kind of blockage that we're having to move through, right? There is like some curse or some heavy energy that we have just not been able to move past. And now with the retrogrades, we have the opportunity to finally push through, but it's going to require Pisces things. So trust, faith, vision, prayer, water, right? Anything that's going to give us a little bit of like alone time to kind of pause and reflect. And certainly for some of us, it might even mean we need more rest, we need more sleep. But I do feel like this is definitely very fated. And this is a time where, relationships, words, and commitments from past lives or deep soul contracts are resurfacing. And this universe's way of just saying, hey, this is what you've been preparing for. Now is the time to act on it. It may not make sense right now. Obviously, we have that solar eclipse in Aries, which is kind of like, hurry up, let's go. But in the midst of retrogrades in Pisces. So I think that Mars kind of connection to the solar eclipse in Cancer and the trines is saying we have to emotionally come to terms with things. We have to be ready to move forward. We can't get too comfortable being in the past. Actually, that is going to end up hurting us. It's going to alienate us. It's going to stunt our growth, right? Chiron and Aries. So lots of spiritual depth. Pisces is obviously one of the most magical, mystical signs of the zodiac. I feel like this is all about Mars working with Saturn in the North Node, and it's giving us the opportunity to really kind of transform that energy into becoming our own little spiritual powerhouse. Mars in Cancer acts on the gut, and it's obviously fueled by emotion rather than logic. So the connection here, I think, to the aspects in Pisces is really about the energy of Mars really bridging into the material and kind of etheric side of Saturn in Pisces. So this is a time where intuition now can be acted on. Prayers turn into steps and dreams obviously can become real. So Saturn's presence, I think, in the midst of these trines adds a layer of spiritual maturity in a way. It's asking us to kind of commit to our soul's path, even if it's uncomfortable. And with the retrogrades going on, especially Venus retrograde, there are things that are still stirring in our heart space. We aren't ready, or we aren't sure if we're ready to kind of release old wounds or illusions in love, but we're going to be feeling more so ready as Venus and Mercury are going direct in April. So Mercury's kind of like whispering kind of like little insights, and it's kind of like telling us like, hey, this is kind of what's coming, or, dreams or omens or signs that are letting us know that we can actually trust the process. Put it all together, it's creating like this sacred flow of emotional courage, and it's obviously meeting with the divine timing of all of these planets and Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Very emotionally potent. That's something that I've observed. I can handle a little bit better, I think, because I have a ton of planets in water signs. I mean, I've got, a bunch of Scorpio in my chart. I got a lot of Capricorn. So thankfully it's working a little bit better for me, but still sometimes it surprises me. So those of you guys who have a lot of like air and fire in your chart, you may feel like you're kind of coming up between the waves for air this week, okay? It is going to get better, but remember that Cancer and Pisces are water signs. So with this trine, it can feel like a flood of feelings that are coming in. For many of us, it feels very raw and tender, and that we just can't patch, like that leak. It keeps coming in. It's unstoppable. And with Mars in Cancer, because it's so fiercely protective, sometimes it can have a tendency to also be a little moody. But obviously, trines to Saturn softens the edges, and it's kind of really channeling that intensity into empathy and healing. So guys, working with sound, working with music, working with art, anything connecting to the sea, anything connecting to ancestral work, right? Altars, prayers, temples, churches, healing centers, these are all kind of Pisces realm. Now, on April 5th, when the Cancer moon conjuncts Mars this week, we're going to see that come into a trine with all these planets in Pisces. And I feel like this is when the emotional stakes are going to feel very high. It's a moment to really feel into everything. It can be the love, the pain, the longing, but also the strength. And know that this isn't necessarily personal. Pisces can be our ancestors. It's other realms. It's what's going on in other dimensions. It can also be, kind of like if you believe in like this kind of spiritual, kind of warfare that's going on that we can't quite see. This is where we're going to start to see kind of the tide turn. And I think the light is actually going to start to win. I mean, that's really what the eclipses are about as well. It's about kind of the light coming out and banishing the dark. So it's ancestral, it's collective, it's very soul deep. And that North Node is pulling us towards emotional evolution. Saturn and Neptune and the North Node all kind of being around the same degrees means that we can be more emotionally and spiritually resilient. We can actually become, I think, a little bit tougher, especially with Saturn getting ready to come into Aries. With Neptune in Aries, we're going to feel like it's baptism by fire. But it's definitely allowing us to move forward in this emotional evolution while Venus retrograde is kind of reworking our relational past. Mercury is getting ready to start clarifying what has not been spoken. Saturn's going to test the resilience, and obviously it kind of feels like this cosmic kind of crucible where, tears might fly this week. You might see that, but they can also kind of cleanse. They can purify. Obviously, there's nothing that a little salt water can't kind of clear away, right? So why does all of this matter? I guess that's probably what you're asking yourself. Well, this is some rare stuff. These alignments are rare. The double retrograde, the Saturn North Node connection, the fact that Saturn and Neptune, are going to change signs, and trines from Mars several times throughout. It's Mars retrograde in the sign, both Aries in the signs of Leo as well as Cancer. So now, Mars is getting ready to kind of finish up with this last final trine over the next week or so. And I feel like this is all elevating our spirit, basically. Spirit is Pisces, and it's tying our present efforts with the North Node to the past, right? Mars represents, Mars and Cancer, our past actions. And it's waking us up to future callings. So I feel like, yes, it's going to demand us to really focus on faith over fear, intuition over ego, and it's emotional because it's asking us to lead with our hearts, even though it's going to feel messy, even though, there is a sense of maybe some of the things that are manifesting as breakthroughs, it's going to feel like a bit of a breakdown first. And this could be in relationships, creative pursuits, personal healing. And just the key here is really to kind of lean into the vulnerability and really kind of trust the process. Now, for the week ahead, I'm going to take you guys through the next 7 days, and we're going to kind of talk about where the moon is. We're going to talk about what major aspects are happening, and then we're also going to focus on what the theme for that day is. If you guys don't want to take notes, I got you covered. Click the description below. You guys can find all of this in the description, so that way you can follow along, and you can also plug this into your calendar or just like make notes so you're aware of kind of what's going on day by day. So if you're watching on Sunday, March 30th, happy Sunday. How's the eclipse hangover? You guys doing okay? It's still brewing this morning. Okay. Remember how I told you guys, like the last couple of Sundays have been like war. Like there has been so much conflict whenever we see the moon going through any of the cardinal signs, because it's getting banged up with squares and oppositions to like Mars and Chiron and all that stuff. So until the moon leaves Aries, we're still in the solar eclipse energy. And it happened yesterday earlier in the morning, depending on what time zone you're in. I know we have people all over the place, but I'm here in Texas. So the truth is we didn't have to wait for a solar eclipse to feel or see the effects of the eclipses. For some of you guys, you've been seeing the impacts of the incoming eclipse really since the beginning of March. We had that lunar eclipse in Virgo, which was also kind of setting the stage for, some major conclusions. In that 2-week period, you could have seen some of the effects of that. And then all the retrogrades also in Aries as well. So I kind of feel like it's been like eclipsy all month long. So I'm actually filming this, before we have the solar eclipse. So I don't even know what's going to go down. I can just tell you that on Sunday, the moon is moving through Aries. And it has left that degree where we had a 9-degree solar eclipse, and it's going to continue moving through the sign. So you may not have had anything happen on Friday or Saturday, but you might be waking up going, oh, there's my eclipse moment, And remember that solar eclipse was about brave new beginnings. Solar eclipse in Aries, out of 9. It's optimistic. It's expansive. It's about self-exploration. And I think this new opportunity in the area of Aries in our chart. Obviously, growth can be difficult. It can be scary. And a lot of us are realizing that in order really to take this new step forward, we have to deal with the past. And I think that the Mars square Chiron brings that up. I think the retrogrades bring that up. And this morning, if you're watching and if you're a part of my Sunday crew, put on a helmet, man, because Moon conjunct Chiron means that we are very aware of our emotional wounds. Okay. So especially if you have anything like, I would say 21 to 25 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, be mindful that this lunar conjunction is bringing up some of the Mars square Chiron, which was kind of seated in the eclipse yesterday. Now you might say, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because now that we have planets that are coming into the same aspects as where we saw the ruler square Chiron, it kind of perpetuates some of the pain. It creates a lot of the same kind of domestic issues and challenges. So I always laugh when people are like, oh my God, Aries eclipses or Aries, like full moons or like so much. Or when some of my friends or my clients will be like, I just can't do like Aries lunar transits. And I'm like, yep. As a natal Aries moon, yep. I mean, there is definitely like a get out of my way energy for about 72 hours, So the moon is conjunct Chiron. It's fusing and it's becoming aware of this issue with maybe identity issues, wounding issues, physical. Aries can be the head. So anything connected to headaches, sinuses, migraines, problems connecting to allergies, inflammation of the face, the head, bumping the head, concussions, right? This is definitely, I think, kind of saying like, where are we getting in our own head and emotionally where we haven't healed and processed things and like, maybe reverting back to old habits or old patterns and then like getting moody or getting confrontational. And that's the square to Mars. So you'll be feeling that, early in the morning. It might hang around until the moon goes into Taurus. So be mindful if you're an early riser that this tension is still in the air, or if there was some stuff coming up yesterday, we're still kind of waiting for the dust to settle. Something else that we're seeing today is that Mercury has now retrograde back into Pisces. Okay, so we're going through familiar territory. We know that, Mercury went through Pisces before it went into Aries. This is a sign where it's more intuitive. It's more about looking at the signs, the symbols, the omens, the dreams. It's all about emotions. And sometimes we can get taken over by emotions so much that we can't find the words. And so this is not a transit that's known for clarity, right? Whether it's retrograde or direct, being in this sign, it's in the opposite sign of where it's most comfortable, Virgo. And it's also dancing still with Neptune, so there can be some clarity issues. It's dancing also with Venus, where there's this rearrangement going on with matters of the heart and relationships and how to communicate what we want and what we don't want and what we need. And Pisces can be confusing, vague, foggy, but also it can be conspiracy related. It can be about what's hidden, it's secrets, and things that are kind of being revealed through the retrograde. So with Mercury conjunct Neptune and Mercury kind of hitting that 29, it does feel sometimes a little challenging when it comes to dealing with logical, practical things, making plans, calculating stuff, organizing things. Mercury in Pisces doesn't want to do that, right? It does not want to focus on creating labels in a label making machine. It does not want to clean up or, organize things. It would much rather be writing poetry. It would much rather be watching movies. It would much rather be, maybe doing some dream interpretation. So you're going to notice that kind of shift. Mercury transits are important this year with the South Node in Virgo. So wherever Mercury is, it's kind of actually saying, hey, we need to get out of this. We need to release this. It's not healthy. It's not, practical. Maybe it's like we're getting too much in our own head, or we're maybe trying to be too perfect. Going back into that sign, in the midst of what is a morning where the eclipse vibes are lingering, bringing up those Chiron wounds with the clashes between the moon and Mars, emotional sparks can fly. So this Mercury retrograde, I feel like happening where it's meeting Neptune and then going back into Pisces, it's going to blur our thoughts a little bit. It's going to kind of feel like a poetic haze. And then what we will see later in the day when the moon leaves Aries, it's going to go into Taurus. So we're going to see things kind of the latter part of the day, kind of even up a little bit. This is kind of early evening, Central Time. Moon goes into Taurus, and it's like a very different vibe. This is going to be more so grounded, and obviously now we're picking up more of the energy of Venus, which is still conjunct Mercury, but it's working towards that North Node connection. So Possibly, Sunday, Sunday evening. I feel like it can be great for making dinner, staying in, maybe watching some movies, kind of relaxing, having like a really chill night. And we can maybe kind of smooth over some of like the challenges that have kind of come up over the weekend. Now, we will see a bump in the road. The moon will be coming into a square, with Pluto. And this is going to be in the later evening hours. It depends on where you are. It's around 9 o'clock Central Time. And it's at a communication degree. So when that moon squares Pluto, it's definitely going to be bringing up some of the issues revolving around, okay, we're testing stability, right? Venus being connected to Taurus, and that connection with the North Node at 27 is also at a communication degree. So it's going to have like whispers of maybe destined love situations coming up. Maybe it's going to be about karmic soulmates, meeting people, definitive changes in relationships, having conversations about where we stand, what we value, what we need. And then obviously we have Neptune's grand entrance into Aries as well, which is directly now connected to Mars, and Mars is still in a square to Chiron. So there is this sense of like, wait a second, where am I going? What is my direction? Where is my purpose? And in the midst of that, we see that, Neptune is at a 0. So this means that individuals are having to get clear about where they are going. And this could mean at home. This could mean in emotional situations. Maybe it's about learning to not project onto other people, or not make assumptions, or even assume that just because something has been a certain way in the past that it's always going to be that way. I think a lot of people are realizing where they stand in relationships throughout these Mercury and Venus retrogrades. I think there is a sense of some people are noticing that people are vanishing, or they're not as available, or they're not communicating as well, and maybe they've always been there, and then we're like, oh my God, did I take that person or that situation for granted? Now they're gone. Or you could be the person who's kind of doing that, right? So there is this sense of now being like, and I've caught myself doing this a lot. I've caught myself doing this a lot over the last month. And now I recognize, after really looking at the astrology and kind of picking through it, I said several times, okay, do it yourself. I'm not going to help you. You know what? I'm not going to talk about this, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to help you figure this out, or I'm not going to be there anymore. And I recognize that that's very much the Neptune and Aries. It's like, I got to look out for myself, I don't know. Give me feedback. Have you guys been noticing this? Have you been feeling that as well? Because maybe there is this sense also in realizing that if we are continuing to kind of handhold or always be there, maybe we're somehow interfering, or maybe not allowing some of the lessons to transpire. If we're always catching somebody, right? Then they're going to learn that we're always going to be there. And at what point are we not there for ourselves in the process of making some of those sacrifices? Just some food for thought. Anyway, so, now we've got Neptune in Aries. This is the grand debut. It'll be a 14-year, I think, spiritual process. It's going to be a spiritual baptism. Baptism by fire is what I keep calling it. And we'll see what happens. Certainly 0 degrees of the cardinal signs are potent. That's, the world access points, and things always happen around these degrees. So I'm kind of curious, even coming into the solar eclipse in Aries, what's going to happen right before the eclipse, because it had to hit so many darn planets before it came into conjunction with the sun. Once again, I'm filming this before it happens, so I don't even know. But your theme for Sunday is just really, healing with heat. And it can mean where you recognize that there is something coming up that's bothering you, and you're like, I got to tend to that, or you're dealing with inflammation, or maybe you got something going on with your back and you got to lay on a heating pad or take a hot shower. And this is also about opening up to visionary beginnings with Neptune in the Aries. So feel the burn, build your dreams. That's the goal on Sunday. Hang in there and kind of manage the flames. And then this will take us into the 31st, which will be Monday. And when we wake up in the morning, the moon is still in Taurus, so we're still watching what's going on with Venus. Now, Venus is coming into conjunction with the North Node. We're also going to be seeing that, with the moon in Taurus, it's a day where I feel like we feel more so grounded. We're not seeing some of the harsh aspects from Pluto any longer. And as the moon moves through Taurus, it's going to start kind of syncing up with all of this Pisces and also with Mars. So grounded central energy from the moon in Taurus. When the moon's in Taurus, it encourages stability, right? It's about money, food, security, values, pleasure. financial things. And, with Venus retrograde aligning with the North Node, this is stirring up some deep emotional reflection and karmic connections. So maybe this is the day where you have a miracle. Someone or something shows up and just pops into your life and is there to support you, to make you feel supported. I was telling my husband the other day, I was talking to my mother-in-law, and we were getting ready to travel. We were coming back from our trip, and she made some comment that she was like, "Oh, I pray for you guys." She's like, "I pray that, you're safe, you're secure, when you're traveling, and you guys continue to be well and happy and healthy and successful." And I was like, oh, not in a bad way, but it's like, I don't know if you guys have had somebody say that to you, where they tell you that they're praying for you, for your support and your stability. And it just it hits different, right? Especially when you would never expect somebody to say that. And so I kind of look at the transits going on in Mercury and Venus in Pisces, and it can mean that we're now becoming aware that there are actually people out there that are praying for our success, or they're thinking positive things, or they're wanting to kind of send us support, or they're maybe popping in saying, "Hey, I had a dream about you. You okay? You need anything?" And Pisces is also, hospitals, churches, temples, things like that. So it's kind of highlighting that. Perhaps maybe, because the moon is getting triggered with this Venus-Mercury thing, we do start to hear more financial rumbles, right? The moon did come out of a square with Pluto, so it can represent tension in, financial situations, but that there is some kind of saving grace. So there is something that, even in spite of the tension, we're uncovering and realizing, okay, what we truly do need. And if we are in need, Pisces is really charitable. It's about giving and being able to kind of help other people. So the theme here on Monday, as we go through those transits, is really going to be about seeking comfort. For some of us, it's going to be in faded relationships. For other people, it's going to be material pleasures. For others, it's going to be in some spiritual practice or routine. Certainly, we might be asking ourselves, well, what can I afford? Or how am I going to pay this bill? Or how is this going to, become fixed? And I would say for Taurus to be able to feel its way into something, it's going to start with the emotional shift. So you may not have the extra $1,000, right? But if you're working with Mercury, Venus, and Pisces retrograde, and you're going, "Oh, thank you, universe, for this abundance that, continues to flow my way. I appreciate everything that you give me, so that way I don't have to worry about anything. And I know that you provide," and you feel your way into it, you'll see the changes. And that could be with anything. That could be with financial situations, physical situations, health situations, what have you, and just pay attention to what's kind of coming up for you emotionally. And certainly with the North Node conjunct Venus, this is a time where we can see certain significant people come into our life, right? Venus is relationships. It's at a Gemini degree. So I'm seeing a lot of situations where it's like, soulmates are clocking in and clocking out for their duties, for their shift. It's like some people are leaving and they don't realize why they're leaving or why they've got to go. And it's because there's other people coming in. Anyway, just some food for thought. So we're going to see that pretty much be most of the 31st. Just like I said, it's all going to be about seeking comfort. The moon's not really going to make too many aspects. We're not really seeing anything else that's kind of going down. So the moon's pretty unaspected most of the day. We're going to see more aspects actually happening going into the 1st. So this will be Tuesday, April 1st, and we wake up with the moon conjunct Uranus on April Fool's Day. So be careful how much you freak out about something, or somebody might kind of get your goat or kind of shock you or surprise you with something. I could definitely see that. Moon conjunct Uranus on one hand can be emotionally startling, but on the other hand, it can represent this emotional intelligence and that we're tapping into something and picking up on something. It's at a 24, so it can mean intuitively feel like there's about to be a physical shift, financial shift, a global shift. And April 1st, we see the moon come into conjunction with Uranus in the early AM, so we feel kind of electrified. And then it's also going to sextile Saturn, which is going to kind of give it some emotional kind of stability, which is nice with any connections to Uranus. It's going to be sustained kind of changes, growths, or shifts. We are also going to see the moon then sextile Venus, which is great because it's the ruler of Taurus. And then it will come into a sextile with the North Node and Pisces. I feel, and this is just me personally, if Pisces is our intuitive feelings, conclusions, endings, releasing, letting things go, karma, It can mean that some of you guys are like, I have a really weird feeling about something financially, or I feel like I should pick up an extra can of soup at the grocery store, or I should take some cash out or something like that, because Pisces can represent where we're kind of picking up on something that's about to shift collectively. And if we tune into that intuition or that dream, we can actually be better prepared. So there's a lot of interaction going on with sextiles to Pisces, where this is kind of more the dream, the vision. This is the physical shift. And the moon's also in a sextile to Mars. So it's very much about, well, what do you physically possess? What do you own? What are you collecting? What do you have in your pantry? And this is in a home sense. So I've seen, I'm in America, but I've seen like stuff that's kind of gone on in Europe recently, where certain countries are like, you need to have at least 3 days worth of food, in case there is some kind of like active war. I'm like, what's going on? And then I see aspects like this and I'm like, oh, okay, Pisces can very much be about panic as well, worrying, concerns about things. Not saying that's going to happen, but I look at this and I'm like, listen to your gut, on Tuesday if you feel like you need to kind of pack something or have something so you're kind of better prepared. We will see the moon come into Gemini, and that's not going to be until closer to the afternoon, early evening, but the moon will then shift into Gemini. So it's going to be more about communication, travel, learning, contracts. And the moon's going to make some nice aspects. We've got a sextile to Neptune, so where we're kind of also following our own inner vision, we're able to kind of make moves, communicate, share, and learn. And that moon's also going to form a trine to Pluto and Aquarius, where I think this is going to like light the internet up on Tuesday. I think that essentially, there is a day first that starts with surprises or breakthroughs with Moon Uranus, and then it flows into supportive creative vibes with sextiles to planets in Pisces and also Cancer. And then in the early afternoon, the Gemini moon shift, it's going to bring up curiosity and also intense transformation through the trine that we're going to see with Pluto. Okay. So kind of interesting stuff here. This is going to give you a little bit of like where we've been at the beginning of the day with like all like the Pisces, Taurus, Cancer stuff. And then by the end of the day when the moon is in Gemini, where Uranus will be this year, sextile to Neptune, sextile to Pluto, you're going to see the other side of like what we're actually going to be experiencing more so collectively in 2025 and 2026. So I'm interested to see just how like fiery and feisty and like kind of informative the second half of April 1st is. So my advice and really the theme here for Tuesday is just, expect the unexpected. And I don't say that because it's April Fool's Day. I say that because of the Uranus aspects, because of the aspects that are happening also with Neptune and with Pluto. And I think that this is also, these unexpected shifts leading to awesome communication. It can be very powerful communication with Moon trine Pluto. It's also providing us with a lot of emotional depth. So it's almost like we can feel our way through things, and then we get to the end of the day and we're like, okay, now I'm going to take action. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of manifests for us on Tuesday. Now, this is then going to take us into what's going to be April 2nd. So that'll be Wednesday. And when we wake up on Wednesday, the moon is now coming into conjunction with Jupiter and also a sextile with the sun. So this is like one of the first real nice aspects that we see since the solar eclipse in Aries. Now we're getting moon sextile the sun. So we're going to start to kind of build on the communication, the learning, the traveling, the information. Maybe this is when we're starting to kind of speak out and vocalize, hey, this was my intention. This is what new thing I'm starting. This is what I'm doing. P.S. Mercury and Venus are still retrograde. So hopefully you're not launching a lot of these things or doing a lot of these things until the second half of April when planets are direct. But still, now we're able to kind of see some growth here. To be honest with you, Wednesday is a relatively quiet day. Other than the fact that we see the moon sextile the sun, where we can take action, be bold, daring, independent, communicate, learn, go after what we want, initiate conversations and contracts, you'll see a moon conjunct Jupiter, and that's pretty much it, okay? So we're not going to see too much else that's kind of going on in the skies. Mercury is approaching a connection with the North Node, so you might see that this is like, oh, there's conversations coming up or proposals or connections, and like I need to sit on it and kind of think about it a little bit. That could happen, but it's not conjunct the North Node exactly yet. I feel like the Gemini moon, with that conjunction to Jupiter, it's really enhancing optimism. And it's at a lunar degree, by the way. So it's at a 16 degree. So it's a Cancer degree. So, communicating our emotions in a more positive way, better communication with neighbors, community, also with family. And it's about big ideas with moon conjunct Jupiter. And then that sextile to the sun, and the sun's exalted in Aries, it's boosting confidence, right? It's boosting, initiative. If you're willing to strike while the iron's hot, initiate the meeting, send the text message or the email, it could be a very lively social day, but it's a nice kind of reprieve from some of the other stuff that we've had kind of going on earlier in the week. So, I don't think hump day is going to be so bad. The theme really for the second is that watch for the expansive thoughts, watch for bold self expression and being more assertive and more direct with other people. And I feel like, fortune's really going to kind of favor the bold this day. Now, this is going to now take us into the 3rd, which will be Thursday. All right. And in the morning, the moon is still in Gemini, but we're going to see just like a traffic jam of stuff that's going to be happening on Thursday. All right. So just across the board, because look at how many planets we have in Pisces. Look at what we've got with the moon going through Gemini. And then we've got the north and the south node also in the perspective signs. Thursday is a day where we're going to have to problem solve. Whenever I see mutable squares, situations and circumstances are changing, weather is changing, plans are changing. Sometimes there can be different, perspectives. There can be different beliefs. There can be cultural clash, religious clash. It's part of what we see with this transit. So there's a lot going on. Thursday is not my favorite communication day. It's my favorite day to get communication from, the cosmos or intuition, but not act on it. But actually acting on it, we might find that we make mistakes or we're a little too optimistic about what we're able to kind of achieve because that moon's coming out of a conjunction with Jupiter. So the moon moves through Gemini still. We're watching Mercury. So Mercury is still heading towards that north node with Pisces. I really think all week we're going to see some crazy dreams. Write them down. They can be really symbolic and significant and help show you where you're working through blockages spiritually, emotionally, or mentally. Now, that moon is also going to come into a square with Saturn. So there's going to be a difficult time doing what the Gemini moon wants to do, which is be curious, share, learn, communicate, travel. And we're going to see some kind of block. And then we're going to see the moon come into a square with Venus, where, there on one hand is the emotional intelligence of the Gemini moon, wanting to rationalize things, keep an open mind, communicate, versus the sensitivity of Venus in Pisces retrograde. So maybe we might feel like I want to have a conversation, but it's not the right time, or I try to talk to them and they're not ready, and then we find that we're like word vomiting and like triple texting people. Like that's the kind of stuff that could happen on Thursday. We will then see the moon come into a square with the north and south node, as well as Mercury, okay? And this is important because when the moon squares its ruler, it's in discord and disharmony. There's something that's not correlating or connecting between emotions and also communication. And like Mercury retrograde in Pisces is something is not connecting with emotions and communication. And then we've got the moon that's squaring the north and the south node. So I feel like there's going to be some pressing need to have a conversation with somebody, or somebody's going to initiate, or they're going to try to kind of connect, or maybe we're learning something in some capacity, but still not a great communication day. Because with the moon square the north and the south node, there's going to be some news, some media, some information that's going to come out. We're going to go, is that accurate? Is that correct? Do the numbers match up with what we're being told? Certainly, Mercury can be analytics, but Venus can be money, right? So there's something that's just not quite being represented, I think, accurately. Things that are being fudged. And all these 27s are Gemini degrees. So it's going to be about contracts, communication. So maybe Thursday is a day that's like, if you get the email, you get the proposal, you can look it over. I wouldn't act on it. I feel like then after we see that kind of buildup of, midday miscommunication and things are going missing and kind of haywire, then the moon comes into Cancer where it's at home in the evening, but it's immediately going to be squaring Neptune. Okay? So Neptune's at a 0, moon is at a 0. Moon square Neptune, I feel like, is about emotional sensitivity and like not knowing what we want to absorb from other people. Pretty important topic considering, Venus and Saturn coming into conjunction. I have found myself on several occasions being like, oh, there are just some people's energy that's like ick. And it doesn't mean it doesn't matter to me if it's on the other side of the phone or if it's somebody that I'm passing on the street or in the grocery store or in public. I have noticed that being around certain people, and it's not any particular group of people, just overhearing things that they're saying, or mannerisms that they have, or maybe behaviors that they're having, or how they're treating other people. I've really noticed it's been me observing how people are talking or treating other people. I'm like, I get the ick. And I think that's been very much the Mercury, Venus, and Pisces. And I'm like, oh, that is not something that I want to be around. And I just kind of feel my spidey senses go up and I kind of push my bubble out. And I'm like, nope, I need an extra 5 feet from this person, or this group of people. And you guys might feel that this week. I think with the moon square Neptune, you're more aware of, I might need to distance myself from that. That doesn't feel good, or I don't share that kind of perspective. Pay attention to what happens with this vibe shift. I mean, the moon's at home, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be too gnarly. It's going to move pretty quick, but having the moon in 0 degrees and Neptune at 0 degrees does make me feel like we might see that there is some discord revolving around what leaders want, their visions for the future, versus, how people are emotionally responding to that, how countries and people are responding to that. The moon can actually represent the people of a country or their homeland. And certainly Saturn and Neptune coming into Aries, we're going to see brave new visionary leaders and younger people who are going to be getting involved in politics and also in anything that's kind of connected to leadership. But do they have a vision that everybody can align with, right? That's the question. And so I think that we're going to have some issues kind of seeing eye to eye with certain people's beliefs and perspectives with that lunar shift. So on the 3rd, tension can rise here. You can see both because, the Gemini moon's clashing with Pisces, which is more emotional earlier in the day, creating confusion or delays in communication or, talking about your feelings. Then we're going to see later in the day, Mercury's North Node connection is highlighting destiny-driven communication, but it's also about keeping an open mind about other paths, right? Gemini degree. Cancer moon brings emotional sensitivity, which could then be clouded by Neptune. So it's Thursday is not my favorite day at all. I feel like there's just too much stuff going on. And with Mercury retrograde, I do believe it's time to kind of be we need to really think about things before we say that and before we actually make a move. Let's get all the facts first. Let's get everything in order. So it's okay to kind of take your time and maybe stall a little bit. So on Thursday, this is about navigating mental friction. And through that mental friction, we're then going to feel a little emotionally exhausted. We're going to feel a little emotionally slimed. There is definitely this emotional fog that's kind of hanging around in the PM hours. And we're like, what happened today? Or you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, you're speaking 2 different languages and you're just I'm so emotionally exhausted. And kind of also feeling a little bit, you can feel a little bit out of place with the moon square Neptune. So this is then going to take us into what will be Friday the 4th. And when we wake up, the moon is still in Cancer. And things get a little bit easier. We're now going to start to see that, even though the moon's going to square some stuff, as the moon goes through Cancer, it's going to start building into trines with all this Pisces. So Friday, the first thing that you're going to see is that there's not really anything, going on. The moon isn't quite in a square yet, but as we get later in the day, the moon will come into a square with the sun in Aries, and that's going to be kind of in the later PM hours. So most of Friday day, not too bad. You're not seeing a lot of aspects from the moon. Mercury still conjunct the North Node. Venus is conjuncting Saturn, but you don't get the square until the evening hours. So it's going to be around 7 o'clock on the Pacific coast. It's going to be around 10 p.m. on the East Coast. I know we have people all over the place, but my brain can only handle 3 time zones. And this square does represent a clash in communication. Notice how many communication degrees have come up, right? 3s, 15s, 27s. These are all Gemini degrees. So Sun in Aries, where this is about our bold egos, our action, our drive, and it's kind of coming into conflict now with the moon. Well, guess what? This is the first lunar square. This is the opening quarter square. So if you go back to what happened on Saturday last week when we had the solar eclipse, now we have the moon square the sun and the moon will square Chiron overnight. So it's going to be, okay, you set this new intention. Now, how do you feel about it? What do you have to change? What do you have to kind of release? What do you have to cut ties with? Where do you have to move? What roommate or family member do you have to kind of deal with? At least we've got planets in their respective signs or exaltation. So actually this can be quite dynamic because neither one is going to kind of want to give way. So what you'll see happening into the PM hours on the 4th is, I feel like with the sun and the moon square, it's creating this inner conflict, right? This conflict between nurturing, Cancer, moon in Cancer, versus asserting oneself, sun exaltation in Aries. In the background, we are going to start seeing now that Mars is trining Saturn. So with Mars trine Saturn, and it's at a 24, so it's a Pisces degree, there are like these invisible strings that are being cut. It's like, nope, now I am going to make the move, right? So Mars at 24, trine Saturn, and also Venus at 24 and 25 respectively, I feel like is really saying that its trine is offering us discipline, and it's allowing us to take action in a much more refined way, and we're building that emotional resilience. So the theme here on Friday is balancing personal drive with emotional security. And guess what? Thank Goddess that the moon is going to square Chiron in the very, very early morning hours. Otherwise, Saturday would be quite challenging. But you're going to see you wake up in the morning on Saturday. Moon comes into Cancer in the 3rd decan. Now it's going to square Chiron, so it's going to feel faintly familiar to what you had at the solar eclipse with the Mars square Chiron, faintly familiar to Sunday, right? If you guys are watching this on Sunday the 30th, because that's in the air with the moon. And now we are going to be seeing the square Chiron again. Early morning, but this is an interesting day, okay? I'm actually quite curious to see what manifests on Saturday. That moon, when it comes out of the square, which is going to be around midday, it's going to come in conjunction with Mars. And it's interesting that this is, the synchronicity is like awesome, okay? 25, 25, 25, 25. What is 25, right? It's Aries. It's an Aries degree. So this is all saying we got to do it. We got to do it now, right? Now is the time. It's go time. So the moon meeting with Mars is this emotionally passionate, heated moment. What are you going to protect? What actions are you going to take? Where are you cutting with the past? And in doing so, you can either, further kind of bring up some of these wounding issues, or you can lean into the trine to Saturn, Venus, Mercury, the North Node. Saturday is the day. Pull out your red Sharpies, circle Saturday, okay? And some of you guys work on Saturday, some of you guys don't. I'm heavily committed to Saturn. I work on Saturdays because I am very Saturnian. But for those of you guys who aren't working, I want you to take note of what happens that day and where you choose to do something different, where you choose to respond to things different emotionally, where you're willing to finally say, nope, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to get the show on the road and it's okay. This will pass. That's very much the trine. I think that, yes, you're going to see, I think with so many of the aspects playing out here, that there is more emotional intensity. You're going to see this peak, especially with the Moon-Mars conjunction, which is going to be somewhere around mid-afternoon. This will be softened, though, by that supportive trine to Saturn and Venus and the North Node in Pisces. And obviously, the Chiron square is still stirring around, so it's bringing up those vulnerabilities. Mercury in the North Node is deepening our intuitive thoughts. And with the moon being in a trine to that, it's saying, okay, you know what? I had this gut feeling. I got to do this. I got to do this now. This is what I got to do. I don't know why, but it just feels right. Follow those hunches, guys. Follow those hunches, because this is also sextiling Uranus, which means it's going to help us kind of better, physically, emotionally, financially prepare for some of the necessary changes that are potentially coming. So on Saturday the 5th, I think that the theme here is really about courageous healing. And it's through emotional strength and the willingness to say, you know what, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is not to fight back. It's to say, you know what, I surrender to this. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to release this. This will pass. Moving through the emotions rather than reacting to them, right? So stay hydrated, go swimming, take a bath, go to the spa, hang out in a sauna, something like that can be helpful. Watch for the agitation that can happen on the home front, the whole, get out of my kitchen, people being kind of combative, conflicts with family members or some domestic issues can definitely kind of happen here. So you want to watch for that. And then this is going to take us into what is going to be moon trine Mercury, which will happen in the early evening hours. And then the moon will trine the north node. It's like, oh, that happened. You want to talk about it? Especially with Mercury in the north node. And how did that make you feel? I found myself saying that a lot with Mercury retrograde and also Mercury in Pisces and any aspect to like Mars. I'm like, so what about that made you so angry? What does that remind you of, right? And so people, when they get asked that question, they're like, oh yeah, my mom treated me that way. Or that's something my brother always used to say to me. Or I used to deal with this as a child. And it's like something clicks. And we're having these aha moments that's like, okay, well, just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it has to be that way in the future. And, did you think about the possibility of the fact that you can do things differently and you can let that go? Hypnosis, meditation, even if you're listening to like self-hypnosis tapes or things on like YouTube and stuff, it can be really, really helpful, guys. Really, really, really helpful. And working with music as well. Mars is like beats, drums, and percussion. So some of you guys might feel like you need that. Like you need to move it out, or you need to just clean house, or you need to dance, or you need to exercise. That can be another way to kind of move through some of these heavy vibes that we're feeling over the weekend. This will now take us into the 6th, which will be on Sunday. And when we wake up in the morning, we've got the moon now in Leo. Very early in the morning, that moon in Leo is going to oppose Pluto, which does bring up some drama. But in spite of that, the moon, as it's going through this sign, it'll be brief. It'll be very early in the morning. The moon's not really going to do much else on Sunday. What I do like is that even though it's in opposition to Pluto, it is in a trine to Neptune. You might benefit from this if you're an early riser. You might feel it actually throughout the day. I feel like that moon in Leo is very passionate, creative. It wants to have fun. It wants to take risks. It's time to hang out with our kids. It's time to, have hobbies, to go out on dates, to do things. It's very dramatic. With an opposition to Pluto and a trine to Neptune, it's like, okay, so this is what's going on in the world. What am I going to do about it? Is it part of my vision? And we're also going to see that now Mercury, Venus, and Saturn are all around that 25 degrees, which is also Aries degree. What am I going to do? The collective is doing this, but what am I going to do? All conjunct Saturn. So this is like that Pisces party in the sky. The third decan of Pisces talks about global shifts, collective karma, also dissolving, collapse, anything with water events, anything with flooding, the ocean, stuff with TVs, televisions, movies, film. All of this is also connected to Jupiter, by the way, which is in Gemini. I have had a theory for some time that this is where some narrative is starting to collapse. That, yes, you're going to see some people that are going to be diehard buying into some of the theories or some of the narratives, and they're going to be extra crazy, right? Mercury retrograde, Saturn, North Node, Neptune. But then there's going to be some people who are going to be like, maybe the way that I've perceived things or what I've been watching or what I've been believing has been influencing, and it's been like creating like this psychosis. Crazy. And that maybe it's a reason why some people have been fearful or have been divisive or have been creating more fear or paranoia, spreading information, misinformation, all of this stuff. Is this the beginning of the end? I think so. I think that this is where we're going to start to see where some of this behavior or some of this, I think, subscription to some of these theories or some of these narratives has been detrimental to people's mental health. It has also been very divisive, and it has been, in a way, a lot of mistruths and other things that have been connected to media. So it's like, Gemini could be radio, it could be TV, it could be anything in regards to major networks. It could be commercials, local television, news anchors. And where those narratives are now collapsing and things are now going to start to be exposed, it's like, actually, that wasn't the truth. And, we talked about it, or you tried to get people to believe these things. And so there's going to be unveilings going out in April where now information is going to come out that will be undoubtedly proving some of these theories to be factual. And it's going to be really hard for some people to accept and to understand and do. And I find myself reminding myself all the time, practice empathy, be patient, understand that people are scared because of what they've been told and because maybe they've been misinformed, they've been panicking, freaking out, now they're angry. And, when you corner mutable signs, they get kind of crazy, right? So we have to wait for the dust to settle and some of this stuff to come out so we can start to make sense of it over the next couple of months. And also we can diffuse the situation, and rather there being conflict, there can be peace, there can be forgiveness, and there can be a way to move forward and consciously choose, once we have the facts and all the figures, whether or not we still want to believe in that grand illusion, right? So I'm hoping that people continue to hope that people wake up. But that bold move of the moon in Leo, it's inspiring creativity and passion as it trines with Neptune in the morning. Maybe, late at night, Saturday night or early Sunday morning, get up, meditate for a little bit, start focusing on the heart space. Imagine something that's kind of glowing and warm in your chest and what you're visualizing and what your vision for the future is and what's going to make you happy. That's going to be the best way to kind of use that energy on Sunday, especially with that moon in opposition to Pluto, because this brings power struggles. This brings drama, between friends and, our goals, between our kids and the neighbors' kids, between our romantic partners and our friends. We see some kind of like polarity that's happening with these two. And it's triggering the sun, which rules the moon. And it's also triggering Uranus, okay? So we see all this Saturn, Neptune, sextile Uranus, which is basically saying, we can release things. It's okay. It's okay to say goodbye. We need to focus on our value system and also feel more stable and secure and confident and be having healthier self-esteem. And sometimes that means some of us know we have to kind of let people go their own way. We can't hold on to them. And the sun is approaching the conjunction to Chiron. And so this will be something you'll see as a part of a week or so from now when we have the full moon in Libra. But that is going to show us the polarity of just which relationships are helping us and which are actually hurting us. And it'll happen right when Venus goes direct. So it'll be like, that's the final countdown in terms of all of these karmic relationships, people clocking in, people clocking out. Who do we hold on to? Who do we have to let go? And if we really love something or someone, we might have to let it go and just let it be and be more brave and optimistic about these new situations and these new opportunities that are kind of coming into our life. Watch for the power struggles. You might see it a little bit early in the morning on the 6th. I feel like with Mercury, Venus, and Saturn, all in conjunction around the same degree, it's blending this very serious kind of reflection and heart-to-heart conversations is very Mercury, Saturn, Venus, realizing what we've been sacrificing and what we need, what we don't have enough of, or where we need more faith or where we need more support. Remember, South Node connection here. So what is and is not healthy when it comes to habits, relationships, our jobs, right? Our daily routines. So the theme here, I think, on Sunday is obviously moon in Leo, dramatic self-expression, but it's meeting with transformation and introspection as we see all of these planets that are going to be kind of dancing in the sign of Pisces. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. I do not have a 12 signs for you today, but in my April horoscopes, I do touch on, some of the Mars, trine Saturn stuff. You guys will see that. So definitely take a look at that. I also talk about it in my Mars and Cancer video. If you want to know specifically where it's kind of impacting you for your sun, moon, or rising sign. But let me know, leave me comments below. I'd love to hear how you guys navigate throughout this next week. I love to kind of see you guys come back and talk about how it played out for you or how you use this to kind of navigate your schedule. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like this video and consider sharing it. Also, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow. And I will catch you guys back here later this week. I will be back on Friday. Friday, we're going to be doing live tarot readings, and I'll be here at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, and that is 7 p.m. Eastern. So catch me here on Friday if you'd like to get a tarot reading. Also, if you guys are interested in watching my Venus retrograde webinar, I still have it available on my website. You can also book a one-on-one reading with me or check out my astrology courses because I teach astrology. So if you've ever wanted to learn, I can teach you through Astro 101 all about how to read horoscopes, how to look at your natal chart, how to be able to better understand all of the aspects and the signs and the planetary placements, and Astro 201, where I teach you all of my predictive techniques, solar returns, lunar returns, we look at transits, and I teach you guys how to put together a horoscope for yourself or for other people for the year. So check that out and more at beyondtheveiltarot.com. Until next time, I'll see all of you very soon and enjoy the week ahead. Take care.